It's the project brief that's got the next task on it. As you can see, you have to kind of describe, analyse and evaluate a second image, an image that you've chosen. And we're going to talk about in the film about how you might make connections between different images. Task 3 involves choosing another image. Now, the image that you choose can be anything from the image bank. So, in a sense, you don't have to. It doesn't have to relate to the pathway that you're in at the moment. It can just be any image that you think is interesting out of that image bank. And we were hoping that if we put images up that we thought were interesting and that related to our different pathway areas, that you would kind of select something, and that would say about something about where you're kind of coming from at this point right now. Now, just to summarise the task so far, you've done task 1, where you've chosen the image and you've described it and tried to kind of say what you think it means, in other words, interpret it. Task 2, using that same image, you try to say why it's good, and in the lecture session we try to get you to sort of say the reasons why you thought it was good instead of just saying you liked it or you didn't like it. So just thinking about how you interpreted it, the meaning of it might have a bearing on how you judge it or evaluate it. So for task 3, you're choosing the new image, and it can be any image you like, and you have to do all 3 of these things: describe, interpret and evaluate that new image. And the thinking behind choosing 2 images is that maybe the first image you chose wasn't particularly exciting enough for you, or what we're aiming for, I guess, at the end of this is for you to be better prepared at comparing images. So if you choose a second image, you can kind of start to think about that in relation to the first image that you chose. But what's very important, in a sense, there's another kind of technical, educational, art term, I guess, is frames of reference. Now, all that means is when we analyse something and when we're trying to find out, what it means, when we're trying to interpret it or, say whether it's good or not, evaluating it. At this point, you're not being asked to look at any other info. You're just being asked to work purely from observation. Because what often happens is, one of the problems that we find students might encounter is just going online, finding out a kind of Wikipedia sort of pronouncement, if you like, about an image, and then using that almost copy and paste style in an essay. And and that's very, very easily spotted by anyone that's kind of done any research within art and design. So it's very important that what you say comes from you, that it's kind of in your own words, and that we can see that what you say about an artwork or an image is, just real, if you like, and not something you've cobbled together from the internet. So we're trying to work with stuff that's pure, based on pure observation, thinking about your frames of reference. So what is a frame of reference? Well, in a sense, you can only know what you know, okay? And that's kind of the point of education. We can introduce you to lots more things so you start to know more stuff, But at any point in your life, you will have what some people call a frame of reference. In other words, what you can understand is guided by what you know already or what you've experienced already. So the whole course is based around giving you lots and lots of experiences and talking to you kind of one-to-one or in small groups about, other artworks and how it might relate to what you can do in your artwork, or how you might kind of be influenced by, artworks or artists to push your own ideas forward. So this frame of reference is important when you come to an image like this. So this is the Michael Borromans image that's in the image bank. And Michael Borromans would be considered, an interesting artist by a lot of people, but would be more appropriate to the fine art pathway. So let's think about this. What can I see? Well, I can see a young woman. What's odd about this? Well, it's a painting of a young woman's upper half of her body. It looks like her shirt but she appears to be on a ground or a table, which looks like it could be a corner of a room, just because of the brown area that's painted. Sort of goes in a kind of diagonal, a slight diagonal, and you can't see it disappearing behind this figure. What do I know? Have you got an idea of what art movement or what idea has influenced this image? Because one of the things that the artist has done, which is very interesting, it's uses realism. You know, it's realistic looking. You can see what it's depicting. It's painted, well, it looks like paint in a way that means you can kind of see that it's a woman looking away from you. There's a kind of, or with her back turned towards us. But where her shirt kind of hits the table, there's like I'm assuming it's a table, there's a reflection. So if there's a reflection on this brown surface, you know, you can assume maybe it's a polished sort of table. So why does her body kind of disappear, like as if she was in water, into a tabletop? Well, the art movement or idea that's influenced this image, you know, I think you could argue that it's surrealism. Thinking about why he might have kind of cut this woman off like this, I think using that kind of realistic style and having this figure sort of maybe on the floor like this, and she's a young woman. I mean, we can't tell how attractive she is, but we kind of, you know, she looks like kind of a regular young woman, but she's kind of cut off at the bottom here. So in a sense, going back to thinking about the interpretation of this image, thinking about the techniques that have been used, how the artist might have arrived at this. The artist might have kind of been playing around with photographs and chopping up photographs that he'd taken of friends or models, and he may have kind of made a little collage that he worked from. I'm only guessing at this, but I'm wondering, in a sense, when you make a painting like this, and the techniques take a long time to kind of realise a painting, you know, a fairly long time to realise a painting like this, then the artist may have played around with something that's quite, you know, a lot quicker to work with, and may have kind of just thinking about how other people make art, he may have kind of had a collage and worked from that. And I think the colours represent for me kind of sort of a natural light, maybe from a window, or maybe some kind of simple single bulb type of light. So something very simple, and it kind of makes it feel slightly more like even it's not a nice institution, but it's an institutional sort of light. You know, it might be in a hospital or a prison or something like that. That's what the light kind of reminds me of. So the colours in that are very influential. And why has he done that? Well, I mean, I think if you literally cut someone off in their middle, that's quite a violent, you know, it's a very violent thing to have done. I wonder if there's something that he's trying to say about this image that's to do with violence, or maybe violence towards women. It could be something like that. Or it could be just that he arrived at this through playing around with collage and cutting up photos and taking photos of people that he thought were interesting to work with. If we think about that in relation to this image hasn't been, I mean, I feel that the image that the artist has worked from on this one has been maybe generated or made by the artist. But with this one looks like an image that's been found, and there's a lot of artists that do that work on kind of images that are found. And the reason I'm saying the artist found this is a current contemporary kind of artwork, yet this image here is used techniques that look like they were made in the 30s or 40s. This old photograph, because it's such a high, you know, there's so much information in this that's been recorded through this, then it's probably used a very kind of high-end way of making photographs. And the way the kind of pose is set up with this is, you know, it feels like it might be some sort of, it doesn't feel like a regular snap, it feels like something that might have been made for something like a Hollywood studio, or especially the way it kind of softens out here. So all the focus on the image is this kind of downward looking, beautiful woman that's in this veil. So I'm assuming that the artist has found this image, or has kind of, you know, got hold of it somehow, and has kind of I've seen quite a few images by this artist, so there's a lot of images where he has sewn into them, and the way that he's sewn into them often relates to the kind of image that he has. So just thinking about this image again, it's an old photograph. This is basically what I can see is an old photograph that's been sewn onto. So we've talked about what kind of old photograph, what's the atmosphere of the photo, why has it been sewn onto in that way, and what connections can we make between images? Well, the atmosphere of the photo is quite hard to tell because it's sort of this kind of grey, sort of brown sort of colour, and she's just kind of looking downwards. Well, we can't really tell what expression she's got because the artist has emphasised her looking down by sewing those green sort of rays of thread down from the eyes. So for me, when I think about what connections can we make between the images, or why I think they're good, it's because when you look at these two images like this, they're not easily explained. They're kind of, I look at them and they kind of ask questions of me, and I think that's interesting. They use realism, which I think was interesting, but I'm sort of intrigued. It's a bit like when you say you see a film and you don't know the end, you want to know what happens at the end. Well, it's that sort of same sort of desire to sort of know why is it like this? Where are they? What are they doing? Why has he kind of done that? And I think that's one of the things, that sort of not knowing what's going on with an image is one of the things that really keeps my interest in an image. And when you're thinking about images, and both of these kind of, well, this is more, this could be considered within the fine art pathway, be more something within the sort of lens-based pathway too. Making images that get people to think about what it is they've put together. Surrealism is often kind of associated with the idea of putting one thing with something else that isn't necessarily strictly related, and you get this kind of third thing that happens. When you add the thread to a photograph, or you kind of change, you do something odd to a figure that looks realistically painted like this, you're putting the viewer in the position of trying to work out why they've done that. Obviously it's got to be interesting to look at, it's got to kind of fulfill those criteria, and I think both of these images are interesting to look at, especially when you think about they're basically working on the idea of the portrait, but they've kind of played around with them in a very intriguing and mysterious way, so you're kind of looking at them and trying to work them out. If we look at this illustration, this is from a book by Oliver Jeffreys. There are connections you can make with this in terms of surrealism. We have a kind of a more cartoon-like figure, if you like, but still got elements of realism. We can kind of tell that's a figure, it's a little boy, but this figure has been drawn onto or over what looks like collage. So in a sense, surrealism for me is present within this too, because you've got all of these kind of different sections that maybe relate to comic books, but also you're putting this figure on top of a map, or you're putting this figure on top of a kind of, what looks like some kind of maths book, or you're kind of creating this kind of collaged situation that relates to TV. And there's all these kind of references within this because the artist has kind of decided to put these illustrations on top of older found objects, but that relates to this idea of the boy eating books. So it all kind of ties in together to make this kind of intriguing illustration that kind of, it's very rich. It's got lots of questions that it still asks of the viewer, and this is one of the reasons why this is such a strong kind of popular piece of work. If we look at this Tim Walker image, again it uses this idea of surrealism, but maybe in a slightly more kind of attention-seeking way. Now, it's hard to tell whether this line is real or whether it was has been photoshopped in, or whether it was really shot in that place at one time, and then these two were shot in the same place with the camera in the same position at another time, and they were kind of put together in that way, because there's enough kind of space between these two sections for that to be done. So in a sense, the techniques that the artists have used are intriguing, because you're looking at it and thinking, oh my, how has that kind of been put together? But the thing about Tim Walker's work, and it's not really enough time to kind of do him justice here, is that he's obviously referring to classical painting. There's one in here. Now, what's in this painting here relates. These are animals here. There's an animal here. Now, why aren't these? The questions that are asked. Why aren't these models modelling these amazing opulent clothes in this opulent kind of rich environment? Why aren't they scared of this animal?